I can't help but tell you how excited I am about this next discussion. I think it's a few things for me. One, we've got some incredibly talented panelists on board, from Cheryl, who joined us at the very first Testing Talks conference and actually hosted our very first panel discussion back in 2019, to Tim Hogarth, Chief Technology Officer at ANZ. For me, it's pretty amazing to have the CTO at ANZ come to Testing Talks, to support Testing Talks, but then to also speak at Testing Talks is amazing. It kind of goes back to what I said in the introduction. We really want to pump up, promote, and make testing visible. Well, this is a testament right here that we're doing exactly that through Testing Talks. So it's an absolute honour to have Tim and the rest of the panel discussion here for a panel titled How ANZ Leverages GenAI to Transform Testing Activities. I'm going to leave the rest of the panel and hand it over to Tim. Over to you, Tim. Thanks a lot.
Yes. Thanks very much, Cameron. And it is an honour to be here. And if CTOs don't care about testing, then they probably shouldn't be in the CTO role, because testing is a fundamental part of actually delivering technology. So, thank you. I'm honoured to be here, Cameron. So thanks very much for that nice introduction. We've got a bit of a talk today. We're going to have a bit of a discussion around using AI in testing, and it's a pretty exciting time. We're going to show off or share, I guess, some of the anecdotes of what we've done, but also, I guess, the stuff we've done and the stuff we're considering, and then the stuff we're sort of thinking that we might do in the future. And I'd like this to be a bit of a conversation, so I think there's a mechanism for people to maybe ask questions to the audience. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work out, but we'll see how that goes. But we've got a few questions here. I'm going to ask a couple of my panellists, and really what I'd love the takeaway after the next hour is just sort of both what we're doing, but also what might be possible. But really, why are we embracing AI? It's not just a shiny toy. It's actually, I think, going to be a tool to deliver fairly significant amounts of benefit. And the question is what are those benefit pools going to be? They're going to be quality, they're going to be time, they're going to be throughput, etc. So I've got three awesome ANZ people here. There's a bunch of ANZ people in the room as well, so hi to everyone there. But I'm going to... but I'd like to pass over now to each of the people around here. We've got Rico, we've got James, we've got Cheryl. I'm going to pass to each of you, and if you just make sure everyone in the room knows who you are and what it is you do at ANZ. Over to you, Cheryl.
Yeah, happy to kick off. So thank you everyone for coming to the session. And I did want to give a shout out actually to Cam and all the people who have organised this event and all the events in the past. Cam mentioned that I'd been here at the very first one, and I think Cam's commitment not only to testing but to make sure that we see diversity on panels, so in particular to have women on panels. So shout out to any women out there, make sure you put your hand up and see if you can come along to the next one and get in front and have a bit of a chat. That's a quick intro, but around me, so I'm working at the bank at the moment. My role is Migration Test and Environment Director, so I'm working on internal migration, which is moving our beautiful customers from our classic platforms onto our Plus platforms, and also working on Suncorp Bank migration as well. So it's heaps of fun.
Thanks, Cheryl. James?
Heaps of fun, eh? My name's James Grover. So I look after payments technology, or at least a portion of it, and in that team is a number of testers that report to me. So we look after basically all the money that you move around within the bank. That all flows directly through our team. So that's whether it's external, internal, a lot of industry connections and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty important part of the bank. You can't have a bank without payments, as much as we like to be ignored sometimes. And
just to give everyone a sort of a sense of perspective, what's the sort of payment throughput of just some of the rails, the higher volume rails that you're talking about in terms of volume?
So in terms of volume, we do up to 800 transactions a second.
And what happens for those seconds when if it doesn't work at 4:30 a.m. on a Saturday night? What happens?
Well, a lot of people can't pay for their shopping, and a lot of people can't pay for their cabs, and so it's exceptionally important that we have a very resilient solution when it comes to payments. And as we've all witnessed over the years, not all banks are perfect. Luckily, we have one of the best availability patterns in the industry, but it doesn't always go right, and it's really important that we test those things. And from a testing point of view, we also have to move exceptionally quickly. So, part of the reason why we're here today is that from not only from our customers demanding new and innovative new features, but also we get a lot of that from the industry as well. So a lot of schemes compliance type work and that sort of thing, and that all has to happen as cheaply as possible, in the sense that we want to make sure that it gets in and it's perfect, but also we need to make sure that it's right, and that's one of the things about working in a bank for sure.
And for those of everyone in the room, we all think of payments as just tapping our card and that's it. But just a little bit more, when James talks about customers, ANZ actually serves, we've won 10 of the last 11 agency deals in the region. So we do payments for governments, we do payments for other smaller banks. So there's a fair amount. So how many different payment flows are you having to test? Like, it's not just the fact that I can tap my credit card, is it?
Not at all, Tim. So he's really sticking me on the spot now, so he loves it. So there's obviously card transactions, which we all know and love. Then there's all of the direct entry type payments. So that's when you go into a branch and you're moving money from one account of yours to another account, or when you're moving it from your ANZ account to another bank's account. As well as all of the NPP payments as well, which we call OSCO or NPP. So those all also flow through the team and, arguably through the bank. So all of those nuanced payments, they all need different solutions. And then across the world, there's also 32 other countries that we do domestic faster payments in as well. So they all need to be tested. They all have different compliance ratios. They all have different throughput that we need to do. So it's very complex when it comes to making sure that we, get it right, but also making sure that all those interconnected entry points for money that comes into the bank, that they all meet up and synchronize, and it can all that money can be found at the end of the day.
Kind of like oxygen, really boring, but pretty essential, and
Well,
you don't really see it.
Without the payments team, you'd really just have a vault. So you can't get your money in, you can't take your money out. So it's a pretty important part of the bank for sure.
All right, thanks. We'll pass over to Rico. Tell us a bit about yourself, Rico.
Hi, I'm Rico Zhang. I'm the capability area lead in an institutional space. A bit different from James, the payment system doing hundreds of transactions per second. We are helping the corporations, institutions to borrow money from ANZ. So our transaction may be 3 or 4 transactions per second, but the transaction can be huge. Hundreds, $1 million sometimes for the credit approvals. So I look after DevOps, platform engineering. My mandate is to support and accelerate delivery software faster in the space. That's about me.
Okay. So Rico's being a little subtle. Some of the stuff that his team does in the institutional business. So we have lots of businesses, and institutional is. Probably nobody in the room here will ever deal with an institutional part of ANZ. They're the people who have lots of zeros at the end of their kind of accounts. We're talking about big banks, we're talking about big institutions, everything like that. And that's where you've got probably the most amount of complexity. So Rico's also one of the first people inside of ANZ to start to productionise AI to actually help with some of the testing problems. And one of the reasons it's problematic, I think, Rico, is inside of Insto, because you're dealing with lots of integrations to other companies as part of the flows inside of institutional. You've got a lot of APIs. Now, Rico came to me in, I think it was April 23, maybe September, around about that sort of time frame, and saying, I reckon we could probably fix the testing on AI. So do you want to tell us about your experience around why you thought that was a good idea and what you did about it?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, my team's mandate is to accelerate the delivery. And what we found, I did spend 10 years in retail, and then jump into institutional space. I found that the complexity in the institutional space is much deeper than the retail. It's not just transaction. There's a lot of companies combined together to make a deal, combined together to borrow money. So the knowledge that required by the testing team to conduct functional tests and then the UAT test orders actually you need to spend a lot of time to learn those knowledge before you can do something. So when we're trying to accelerate the SDLC, we automate CI/CD, we're still finding the testing space still taking a lot of time. And then that's where ChatGPT comes along and say, hey, maybe we can look into what ChatGPT can help. That's why we talk to the team and then get support to do a POC using ChatGPT, understand where AI can fit in. And very soon we are getting excited. I mean, we can see a lot of opportunity in there because the AI stuff thinking like an individual, like a people. And then we'll continue to spend the hackathon and all those around it And along the way, move away from ChatGPT, we move into our internal network, making sure things are safe. And along the way, we now have GenAI is helping us with API testing, writing better requirements, sharing the requirements between business, engineer, and tech, and testers. And now we actually, not just think I have an update to you, we start getting GenAI to look at our production instance as well. So it's happening in a lot of space.
We'll probably come back to that and do a deeper dive into some of that. It's a broader topic. Cheryl, we sort of glanced over some of the complexity in retail. You're just doing the simple thing called migration. You talked about ANZ Plus and Classic. So we have a brand new application called ANZ Plus. You download it now, go off and get a bank account. It's the best banking app in Australia. And we're in the process of moving our customers across bit by bit. And that's kind of complicated because some of those accounts have been open, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
But also we've bought this little bank up in Queensland, which is I think 16% of the size of the ANZ retail base. What are sort of the problems you're facing in testing, and where do you think you're going to see some of the advantages potentially from AI?
Some of the problems I think are maybe around the test data quality. I think that's an interesting one. And you think about production data, the quality of that, if you've got a platform that's been around for 40 years or so before people had mobile phones, and when you think about ANZ Plus, and one of the fundamental things of ANZ Plus is a mobile phone number. So that's interesting. For us, I think we're kind of looking at the ability to use AI across our whole life cycle and how it can deliver value, because it's a great fun kind of tool to play with, but it's ultimately about the value that it can give it at the end of the game. And we've been really fortunate to be able to work together with Rico and the team. Fundamentally, one of the things that we've focused on is how do we make it easier to get better quality outputs from, I don't know, all the deliverables. You would all be familiar with getting some test requirements that aren't amazing, or business requirements. They've got a little bit of fluff around them. They're not fully fleshed out. We can use AI to help us with that. We're using it at the moment. So I do want to get away from the concepts of doing proof of concepts and exploring around how these things can work for us. But what we're actually doing, which is a key thing, is to be able to ingest ANZ commercially sensitive information at the moment into an internal tool. That's the biggest value thing for us, to be able to push it in there, because you can't push it externally to Perplexity or ChatGPT. This is, it's critical information for us, and we're not putting it outside anywhere. So to be able to use our internal tools to put in a couple of documents and to be able to query those as a knowledge management system to some degree, to get the output of that is great test cases, which we have proven, but ultimately the whole picture, like we want to have a dream when we're thinking about these big tools. You don't want to just say, it can do this and then I'm done. We want to have a dream, and that would be to be able to use AI throughout our whole life cycle, which is requirements, test documents, whether or not it's a test strategies, test plans, test cases, test automation, test data, test summary reports, all of that. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But the big thing for us right now is about the ingestion of knowledge and the ability to query that knowledge internally.
James, payments is not a text-rich business, but where are you seeing AI as a potential benefit in that kind of, your kind of business? You've obviously got a lot of variation, but what's payments doing with AI?
Yeah, I think for us, we've focused, there's no tester in the room who thinks all requirements are amazing. So we've definitely covered that problem off. But we've moved more into...
You've covered that problem off?
Well, we've covered that problem off in the sense that probably every team who's dabbling in AI, the first thing they're probably going to look at is, right, what are these requirements and how will we test that?
Sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said climate. Yeah, requirements. Yeah,
I'd love it if we fix the climate as well. It's hot up here, I tell you. So yeah, we've definitely dabbled in the requirements clarification, I guess, so in the sense that requirements are submitted. We have gone through a process of submitting back how we would test those requirements to the generator of that data, and then we've said, is this the outcome you're looking for? And they've said, yep, that's cool. And then what that does is it crushes in that time to go. There's no no more detailed analysis that we need as we move forward into generating code and then arguably getting towards production. So we've definitely done that part, but we've moved more into environment generation as well in that AI space. So we've not only do we have a tool that will build those environments, but we're also saying, well, as a result of these requirements, here's the environment that we will build for you to test that in. And what that's meant is that we can move a lot quicker in that environment build and triage space. So if we have a problem that's generated by code or by some of the integrations, it will sort of self-heal. So we're definitely moving into that space, which is meaning that when it comes to testing, we're not blaming other teams. The environment itself will self-heal, or it will tell you where the problems are, where you need to focus on. So it's really showed some dividends early on, and it's really working in the sense that as we try to move faster and we try to be a little bit more efficient, the tools themselves are sort of arguably self-aware. So we can deploy code, the environment will self-heal, and it will read the requirements based on what we're trying to generate, and then build that in a resilient type of way. So it's definitely new for us, and it's definitely working really well as far as some of the tools we've built internally and just connecting those together with some of the AI tools that we're building at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you've sort of touched on there. I want to sort of scratch at a couple of them. One of them is this concept that we all have to deal with requirements documents, and we've heard from everyone here that they're kind of terrible by default, right? And I think that's the issue is within the testing space, there's always specs, there's requirements documents, there's evidence that's done, and it's all done in the written word when you're actually testing user interfaces over the top of relational databases. Rico, when you first showed me your testing portal, you were testing APIs because you thought it'd be really easy to write test scripts, and then you realised it was impossible to write test scripts without actually decent requirements. So then you changed and showed me the tool that would actually verify the requirements. Do you want to talk us about what technology you used and why that was so different in terms of verifying a requirement that was testable?
Yeah, so we start with some simple stuff, it's more structured data, API spec, they're quite easy to understand by human, by machines, sometimes by algorithm. And we quickly run into the understanding of that part actually is easy, but the R's from the business or the testing objective that we want to achieve, that one is hard. And then, especially in the institutional space, the terminology orders are very complex. We have something like, for example, credit hierarchies and then credit memo, all those things that testers or developers didn't understand. So we sort of start moving up to the chain and say, okay, before we solve the testing problem, can we make sure that income, before they're getting the requirement coming into the engine room, can we simplify that using AI? Can we use GenAI to understand those requirements and then link it to the other knowledges that somewhere else, like Charles mentioned about, we have 6,000 assets in our service management. So there's tens of thousands of API. They may be doing similar stuff in some way. So before we start testing and making more efficient of testing those individual API, can we reduce our scope of consolidating those API understanding, and then we can test more efficient by test one thing, but actually achieve multiple goals. So that's why we move to sort of upstream.
Yeah, it's great that we've all had those requirements which we've decided are absolutely unimplementable and untestable, and now we've got actual proof using GenAI that you can't test for these and you can help them rewrite it, which I think is a great innovation.
Just add in an extra bit as well. We're talking about requirements, and that quite often is something that we use for progression, so new stuff. We're going to change this, we're going to add some new features, but the requirements don't cover what you did last year or what you did 40 years ago in the case of some of the platforms that we've got. For those, there's very limited documentation. So that's another space that we've been working on, which is how can we somewhat reverse engineer through using our old test cases, if we don't have functional documents of what the system's doing, put some of our test cases in to say, teach us and help us optimise what it is that we're using, because otherwise the knowledge is in here, or the knowledge is in this system that we just don't know anymore. So that's another opportunity if anyone's working in any spaces like that.
We talked a little bit about the data, and I know that we're very nervous in ANZ about data leaving our organisation. We've got a hell of a lot of rules to make sure that data stays in the right sort of boundaries and constraints. But we are embracing some of this technology, which we were talking just before the break. I was talking with one of the ANZ people how it's exciting that we're actually pushing the envelope a little bit more. Rico, do you want to just talk about quickly what technology have you used with AI? Because we've all used ChatGPT, but you can't just... we don't have a contractual relationship with OpenAI, so that wasn't a plan. So what did you end up using?
I can talk a long time on this, but maybe give you a high-level view. We have multiple models running in our... So we built a system called Insio. It's a platform. Inside it, we have currently 3 models running, managed by an AI agent. So underneath is the LangChain agent, open source. So when there's a requirement coming in, the LangChain trying to understand what are we trying to do, and then the agent start proposing what step, what sort of tools are available in ANZ that we can use. If we need to go to understand a bit more of the requirement for share space, you would go to the charts information in conference page to get those knowledge. And then the next step is, okay, now I want to start writing a better requirement. Then you start getting the previous history from Jira about the requirement, understand what the pattern is, and then start writing requirements. And then you start understand which model should we use. We use, for example, Gemini Pro, which is have a bigger context window. When it's seeing a document on conference have a image, because we like doing screenshots and put in there like architecture diagram, etc. And it couldn't understand it. You start passing that image to Gemini, for example, and then get a translation of that into its text so it can understand. So you're going through a lot of different sort of steps, trying to get to the final objective we're asking to do, which is write test cases. So we use Gemini Pro. We have a fine-tuned version of Lemma, which we train it with about 6,000 ANZ API specifications. So it knows how to pass the object between different APIs. And then we also use a vanilla Lemma model because sometimes its write code is better than Gemini. So in high level, all those are running in a ANZ AWS environment, except the Gemini Pro is on a GCP, but it's in the ANZ VPC. That's what we got right now.
So, do you think we're going to have a model per project, or will organisations build one testing model, or will it just come in the product?
I can't tell the future, but for now, my view is that every model is like an individual.
Yeah, okay.
They have their expertise. Some have been trained by ANZ, know about ANZ APIs. Some of them have been trained outside, they know about, for example, APRA requirements. So at the moment, I see that multiple model to work together. They might even talk in the weekend to get something done. But I just came back early this week. I met with Meta, the creator of Lemma. So I think from that discussion, I feel like the whole technology industry is moving to, again, put everything back together into a common model that knows about everything. So I think future is...
Cool. James, so I just want to talk about your role. You've got a large testing team. How big was the testing team?
It's about 240 people.
240 people, so they wouldn't quite fit in this room.
I wish they would, but there's a few lovely representatives in the room.
Good. But you also are dealing with a fairly, not just 240 people, a fairly significant volume of this. Just want to talk about the value of using this technology. You've been running testing teams, I suspect, for a long time. And the scale of the change here feels like it's a fairly material one. What do you think is going to happen in terms of the benefits or the value that we might get from AI? Is it just a curiosity, or is it going to turn into actual business value?
I think the main thing we've noticed is it levels the playing field. So we've got, across the bank, we've got enormous teams doing some fun things. And then we've got some teams that, a lot of the work in the payment space is more compliance related. So it isn't particularly fun. but we still have to do it, and we still have to do it really well. So what that's meant is that we can focus on doing more of the fun stuff and actually removing some of the effort that it takes to deliver the same things that we've always done, but in those compliant spaces. So what it's done is it's freed up that space, or freed up that time, and actually made it more efficient for us to work. So leveling the playing field across some of the projects means that we can use AI to, you don't need a lot of IP when it comes to building these things and testing these things, because you can build that into the tool. So we can still do all the work we used to do, but we can focus on more of the fun work, and arguably the AI tools that we're building are some of the fun work that we're doing. So the team has freed up some capacity to do some of that.
Cheryl, you've been in the bank for a year, I think you said. You've been at ANZ before, some 8 years ago.
Yep.
The migration teams that we've got for Plus and for Suncorp, any idea on how big the testing component is yet?
Oh, we don't have one of the things at the bank is quite interesting, that we're heavily federated in the way that we work and in the way that we release. And this is, in my experience, which is not that long at the bank, even if I add up all the bits and pieces, a new opportunity to look at not enterprise releases, because we can still go live in that federated way, but we have to test at an enterprise level. So it means we go live and functions or features may be disabled. So the teams are still embedded within the testing people are embedded within the application teams, but we have our team who focus on system integration testing and end-to-end testing as well.
But that must be so much more complex than what we've done before.
It's
just
really
because
complex.
migration's not like just checking a feature works.
Yeah, it's really complex. There's a lot of risk involved in that, and obviously we're all testers. We kind of get excited about how do we optimise for that kind of risk.
How many environments are you worried about right now?
I'm just trying to think, there's about 60 different applications that we've got in one. We call them sit lanes when we get to some of these spaces, and it costs millions and millions of dollars to do it. So I'm interested in a session that's on later to talk about how we can do that easier. But testing wise, in my team, I've got about 20 people who have to cover this. It's not always, and I know that Cameron was talking before about at Bunnings that he started off with maybe 4 testers and he's now got 20. We don't necessarily have the luxury of growing our numbers of the team, so it is about efficiencies. It is about making sure that we're doing the maybe more fun stuff and we're using AI or different tools to do the things that are more repetitive, more mundane. Throw each of us back, and we might have a varied group in terms of age in the room, but you think 20, 30 years ago in test automation, one of the goals of test automation was to enable us to focus on the more fun things, and the repetitive things is test automation. So AI now is a new level of that for us as well.
So, Cheryl, I'm quite old, and in my days when I was involved in test environments, we had like development, test and production, and it's changed a bit since then. And I had a rumour that we actually named the sit environments out with an alphabetic letter at the end, and we've run out of alphabet.
Not a true rumour, I don't think, unless a couple of them are hidden in some dark cupboard somewhere.
I doubt there's probably that. No, but the question is that, so in such a complex environment, where do you think the value is going to be? Not just in automating the known, but do you see any value in helping understand, manage the risk of that testing? Because Suncorp's a pretty big bank, and we've got to make sure it doesn't break. ANZ's a bigger bank, we cannot let that one break. So what's, in that responsibility, what do you think AI is going to bring to the table that would justify a CFO investing in?
Yeah, I think it's about analysis. Like, tell me where the risk areas are, predict where we've had previous problems before, and we've got a couple of things which are called 3 big bets, and one of the big bets is to use AI, and within that there's a number of different things, but one of them is around predictive analysis as well, to use what we know to learn about the future. So testing, you could test for 100 days in whatever app that you're doing and find no defects and say I'm good to go live. How many people would say that's, you'd feel comfortable? You don't know, because I've not told you the context around that 100 days was on 2 features and you've got 20 other features that you haven't touched. So through this we can get more information around the areas of potential impact, and through that helps inform where we put our test coverage and what we can do.
Where is this and this is the sort of the sad part of this, where is it not living up to the vision? And when I talk about vision, we've got we've got a lot of important stakeholders inside of ANZ who make lots of big decisions, and not all of them, put it this way, people who haven't necessarily got a deep technical background every now and then have an opinion on technology, and they have seen something and they said, we should be able to do this like magic. So is there any times where sometimes the magic hasn't worked, or people, like where you see either it hasn't worked or you think that we need to temper our expectations to make sure that we don't get our hopes dashed? James, just like in the world of payments, they say, oh, we'll have AI. James won't need 250 people, we can just have James.
Yeah, well, that's a lovely idea, and I wish that was the case. But I think for us, like I said earlier, and like Cheryl sort of alluded to as well, the AI tools that we've built and the AI tools that are now being integrated in a lot of the things that the tools that we're buying for testing, what that's giving us is the ability to move a bit quicker, but we still need a very stable testing suite at the end. So as much as, cool, you can generate requirements, you can generate test cases, you can generate data, that's all lovely. But at the end of the day, especially in payments and especially in a bank, you still need something that you absolutely cannot get wrong. So there's a part where, sure, it's going to crush in some of the earlier testing and some of the requirements gathering and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't add up, it doesn't add up. So we probably as a team, we're unlikely to trust some of these tools towards the latter end of testing, purely because we don't need something that's going to hallucinate at the last minute and then all of a sudden we've got one more zero where it should be, or it's forgotten about a comma or whatever else. And then it's a nightmare.
Commas and zeros are pretty important in your world, aren't they?
Yeah, they are quite important. So we are definitely using some of the tools that we can buy and definitely building some tools as well, but mainly in that interim part. But less towards the end, less to make sure that we are absolutely critically sure that what is going to go into production is exactly what should be there. So I think we are moving quicker, but I think there's still a little bit of distrust around the complete and utter surety of exactly what's going to go into production.
Yeah. Rico, I'll probably direct this question at you or Cheryl, who wants to jump in. There's a speculation that some people say, oh, you can just generate test data using AI. We've had a team that was successful. What they really did was write an algorithm using AI to generate their test data. Where do you see the test data? Because it's the bane of most people's existence, particularly when you've got to deal with distributed data sets that have to be consistent. So the customer database has to have the same fake customer as the identity system, as the payment system, as the home loan system. So any thoughts on whether AI actually helps or hinders or doesn't change the test data problem? Rico?
I think that's referring to what Sharon and I, we trying different things, trying to build the knowledge of ANZ systems. Yes, I definitely feel AI will be able to help us generate more realistic test data, not just by fitting data that fit into the spec, this 5 characters, etc., but it will be able to, based on, for example, the incident happened last week, right? Where the incident happens in China data is a different character, extracting those and add it to the test data. It can generate more smart based on different languages and then different user pattern, etc. So I think it will have it contribute a lot of value, especially across different divisions and in the ANZ. A lot of data we see in for example, in New Zealand, even a similar API is very different from AINC. So, but it's nothing stopping us to try to use it for data and then to test API. So I think there's a lot of those can.
Cheryl, you've got further thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Rico probably mentioned the right word, which is contribute. What we do, what each of us does, whether or not it's test data or testing in itself, it's heavily knowledge focused. So we are basically the people who need to train the AIs, whichever one you're using, to get to the point that you're going to be able to get value out of it, and how much you want to hand that off. I mean, you talked about that you wouldn't want to do it at the end of the cycle, and we're quite sceptical because that's testers. That's what we're here for. It's heavily knowledge focused, and probably a little bit of a look further into the future, and what Tim might ask is that, what does this mean for us in the testing profession? Is it going to decimate the jobs that we have or something or other? I would still focus on the fact that this is heavily knowledge focused. To get the right data out, you have to have people who can verify that it's right, and they're the knowledge workers. And it's also that, you know, it understands the systems correctly. And again, we're heavily involved in those bits.
Let's talk about that elephant in the room though, about this, because there's a lot of people walking around. AI means we won't need any more of this type of person or that type of person, and testing's one of the areas that people said, oh look, there's a lot of work there that we won't need. And obviously people who've made testing their career, particularly someone who's starting out, they might be thinking to themselves, was that a good idea? So what do you think about that, Cheryl?
Everyone should use it. I absolutely think everyone should get involved now and use it, because it is going to make you better as a tester. I don't think it's going to get rid of any of us as testers. It's going to make us better, make us more efficient, help us deliver value sooner. So that's what I would say. If you don't get on board, then yeah, maybe you're one of the people who would be, you know, not the first person picked up. But we are knowledge workers, and that knowledge is something that doesn't exist in AI. It will at some point.
I'm fond of the expression, AI won't take your job, but another person who uses AI might. But James, you've got a very large team, right? Is that capacity, like if you actually make that team more efficient, do you see roles shifting around, and some roles we do less of, or do you just see that overall you just do a better job of managing the risk on payments changes?
Look, I think, if I'm honest, I think our backlog, if we added up all of the work that we have to do, our backlog is about 8 years. Reality is we will use these tools, and we have to use these tools to be able to move fast enough just to be able to keep up. So it doesn't mean we're going to have less people. What it does mean is that we will have a diversified workforce working on more things, and that's actually way more interesting than having 25 testers working on the same thing. What we might do is have 5 testers with one tool and 5 testers with one tool. What that means is that we'll be able to move quicker, and it means we'll just be doing less of the things that are actually relatively repetitive. So sure, we'll be developing our tools, and sure, with the industry partners, we'll be, you know, buying a few tools as well. But I think for us, there's always going to be a lot of work to do, and that's just to get through our backlog. That's not even doing the fun stuff that Cheryl does. So there's always a lot to do.
I feel like you want to come and work in migration.
Definitely not.
It's not a short job.
No.
I'm going to be a little bit more controversial, because I think that we'll have a bet on this, James, and maybe you can buy me a beer if you're wrong in a year or so. But
Cheryl's not buying beers.
the hypothesis I have is that while your team might be static, I think that the structure of your team, or the nature of teams, is going to be quite vastly different. Do you guys know how many people we've got working inside of ANZ, roughly?
How many? Sorry.
How many humans? 46,000, yeah. It's around about that. Do you know how many we had in 1995 before we started using the internet?
46.
About 46,000. Right? Do you know how many people worked in technology back then? What percentage? Less than 2%. And how many people work in technology now? It's 24%. Right? Now, you might say, oh, that's terrible. That's shift. But it actually means the customers changed what they did. We stopped doing as much work. There's nobody in the branch manually reconciling checks anymore, right? There's no one using fax machines anymore. And none of the testing that went into that anymore. But there's a hell of a lot of digital footprint now as our customers have shifted to using self-service devices. And so the organisation, I have no idea whether we'll be 46,000 people in 20 years from now, whether we'll be bigger or smaller. But I would have a hypothesis that the nature of everything we're going to do in banking is going to be quite a bit different. So as leaders, what are you guys going to do to lead the change? I've been ambushing you with this question because I just thought of it. Cheryl, you go first.
I think the first person we should get rid of is Tim, because he's asking these horrible questions.
I can be replaced with an AI at any point in time because I hallucinate all the time.
Look, I agree, but there is a difference between what we do today and what we are going to do in the future. And I think through that time, 20 years ago, there was no people working in technology, but our customers have changed an awful lot in that time. What that means is that they expect the same performance of delivery and the regularity of products that we offer them to come just as quickly as updates on your Facebook. So sure, we've got used to working at a certain cadence, but customers now are demanding a far higher cadence and a far higher level of availability than they ever have. So we need to move faster as an industry, as a banking industry, but probably every single industry is facing the same thing, where it's not 9 to 5 anymore. It's actually 24/7 and even more than that, because they're expecting a higher level of output. So I think things like AI it's the only way we'll be able to deliver those sorts of things in the future.
Rico, you've been one of the change agents in the organisation pushing a new way of doing things. Do you want to talk about any resistance or concern that you've seen? I mean, I'm not talking about the people who are outside of technology. With apologies to lawyers in the room, they're fairly conservative people. Risk people are very conservative. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about technology people in testing in this approach. Did you ever get, it won't work, or we can't do that here, or it's not safe?
I think it will take time for everyone to understand the tech. Some people faster, some people just getting onto it. My observation is AI is impacting people's day-to-day life. So when we start rolling these tools across organization, there are individuals that is question about whether I should use it. And some people, they want to use it, but they don't know how to use it. It's ChatGPT is all about asking questions. There's a skill is missing here, is how can we ask the right question? Because AI is funny that it will be very confidently telling you the wrong thing if you ask the wrong question. So I think is not resistant, but it's a gap that I think they start learning.
Did you do any actual measurement of performance to say the old way versus the new way, either using anecdote or statistics? How did that work out?
So we have started measuring pocket by pocket. For the API test, we found it will improve our speed about 72%. So what that means is, and tester will be happier because they actually don't need to do a lot of data generation, script writing. They can focus on architecting the test. I think we talk about the testing is like a risk business, right? You can never test 100%, but I think now we can get AI to look at the foundation of 60-70%, and then people can get into the interesting stuff about thinking of how to recover those 20%. So I think that's also a mindset shift that is I can see when they're rolling out these tools.
Cheryl, if we think about the existing testing, there's obviously a lot of excitement here. I think we're all pretty excited about the opportunity, but it's fair to say that the vast majority of testing we've had inside of ANZ hasn't really completely changed yet. It's coming in as an augmentation tool. How would you ask, if a CFO came to you and said, well, shouldn't we just use the tech we've got a bit better because there's so much of it versus embracing? What do you think the best use of time is? What do you think we're going to do on migration? Use a lot of new experimental tools, or just use the old tools better?
It's a blend, actually, and it's a really good point about using the old tools better. We're a big bank where we have the luxury of being able to have this tool and that tool and this tool. We've got a number of tools, but we don't necessarily use them well. So one of the things that we're doing is we're making sure that we're using the tools that we have well, where they're fit for purpose, improving the process of using them, and we don't want to get stuck in process, but then not just for migration, but for the benefit of the rest of the bank as well. So we don't want to look at ourselves and say, oh, we'll just do it for us and we'll let everyone else sort themselves out. For us, it's an investment that we're doing to go forward for everyone else in the bank to go faster. In saying that, we also are looking at different tools that there's new emerging problems that we have, so we're looking at different tools, new tools for those kind of problems. It's a blend, and one of the philosophies that we have that many of you would already know is that we want to try and fail fast. We have an open source tooling philosophy. You don't want to invest too much of your time in a tool and say, oh, now I'm locked into using this particular tool. So we want to make sure that we're looking fast, learning fast, failing fast.
Excellent. Now, Cameron, I'm asking a lot of questions. If anybody else in the room wants to ask a question, there was a mechanism to go around. Oh, God, sorry. Go ahead. There's one there.
Do I need a mic?
No, you're pretty loud.
Yeah,
I'll repeat the question if I can.
about 20 years
we're used to in industry, the trading floor, if they had a bug, they could be talking about trillions of dollars left. So they had this insane automation suite that would run at 5 a.m. every day, that there was an incredible investment of money in, because, you know, the risk of anything going wrong was just insanely prohibitive.
Yeah.
Have you started investigating many of those?
I'm going to pass that to James, who's got probably maybe not that specific scenario where a hedge could basically mean a massive market loss, but I think James has got examples where the time between defect and the impact on that is pretty damn significant. So James, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, look, we have a couple of solutions that try and mitigate those sorts of problems. So not only do we have, you know, the team is quite large in payments, so I think in the whole of payments technology, we're looking at about 1,600 people across the team. What that means is we don't always know what's happening at all the time, you know, and we don't necessarily know what code's being deployed into what environments, because there is a limited number of environments and a lot of people working in them. So, like I said earlier, there's only one thing that we can ensure of, and that is making sure that what's ready to be tested is good enough that it's not going to break the bank. So we do run a regular regression every hour across the whole environment to make sure that what we have can go out the door and it's not going to break the bank. So not quite as large as what you talked about, but it definitely, it's a very complex scenario when it comes to multiple different payment flows.
There's one additional thing that's not quite answer your question, but it's interesting, which is we use models that, like Rico's using some of these foundational models like Llama and Gemini and a few of the other ones have been, and those models are evolving under the covers. And so there's a team inside of ANZ that's built a pipeline where they just keep running the models all the time and looking for the one that is the best performing against which parameters they're looking for. And you've got to then keep that forever to make sure that you've got that audit trail. And that testing perpetually in production, we all always talk about that continuous testing. It's a reality, it's a necessity when it comes to ML models. There's a question there, question here, question there. There's questions everywhere.
We have this mic on, bud. Testing. Who was that, sorry?
Thank you very much. Now, AI is used in a lot of industries, specifically in automotive industries, in driving cars. When it comes to that grey line, whose fault it is, when it comes to insurance, I think it's safe saying that responsibility always lies with the driver. Autopilot, not autopilot, whatever you were doing, you're the driver, you're responsible. When this tool is used in projects, in predicting requirements, test scenarios, things, and it's driving multiple people, when you're approaching the finish line of production, and something whether catastrophically goes wrong or minor things forgotten, has it been thought of like, it's not who's to blame, but who's responsible for those self-checks? Because you can easily create no man's land, and it's like, it wasn't me, I read the requirement, I developed this, I tested that, it told me that. So I think we haven't highlighted who's sort of orchestrating to always have a head and a shoulder above everything when everybody's drilling down into details, not hearing people around them. Someone needs to be looking, like sticking their heads up. It's like, is it doing the right thing? Otherwise, it can create mistakes. You touched on this. It can confidently tell you the wrong thing. If you have that trust, I don't want to say who's to blame, but who should we follow with?
It's accountability. Yeah.
Accountability. Yeah, that's a nicer word.
I'll grab this one because it's broader than just testing, if that's okay. We've got a principle inside of anything that's significant, and the word significant or material is a point of debate between me and the Chief Risk Officer. But the person has to have accountability. So if you write code, they go, what if it generates the wrong code? And I'm going to have to tell her that, well, a lot of our engineers write bad code as well, right? So we have code reviews for that particular process, right? And those people are accountable. It's part of a performance management problem if they actually let bugs through. That doesn't change as part of this process. They're still accountable. So if they decide to trust the AI and just push the code through and it turns out they didn't review it, that's a performance management problem. I think you'll see that over and over again with the checks and balances. The hard part is the immaterial decisions. No one's doing an actual validation that the spell checker we use is actually being correct. And that's out of AI. No one's checking that the network optimization that we're doing that's increasingly modelled on AI patterns is correct when we're doing Teams calls, because we just get that as a service. So the problem here is the materiality. And we've got the view inside of ANZ. If it's any kind of material decision, right, that needs, there's a human that actually is accountable for that. And we'll have to watch this closely until conditions change where we have a high level of faith. We could not have a human review every single payment at, what was it, 80 per second? 800 per second.
800%.
We can't check payments 800 unless you basically want to go back to checks. There's a question in there.
You want to pick it?
No, you go.
Okay.
I'm just saying. Run.
Hey, any more questions?
Yeah, there's one there.
A lot of questions.
I got a good view.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the riveting conversation. Really appreciate it. So I work for a company, and we do test automation for Salesforce exclusively. It's a no-code tool. So my question is, not everybody's embarked on automated testing. There are still a lot of companies doing manual testing. So do you envisage or perceive that a lot of companies are going to leapfrog from doing manual testing all the way to AI, whereby they're crossing the chasm?
I would wonder why they're not doing any automation testing at the moment. And for us, and for anyone who's out there, it's a competitive business. So what's the fastest way that you can get your features out to production to get value? And if manual testing is the fastest way to do that, then keep doing that. I doubt it, but keep doing that. I think there's a real opportunity for people to look at, if I didn't invest previously in automation, maybe now I should, to make sure I stay ahead in the market, jump to AI. I would encourage people. I would encourage people to go out there and learn as much as they can. If this is your business, what would you do?
I think that's right, though. It's a journey. I mean, if you're trusting a tool to do a percentage of your historical testing, it's a leap to get to, oh, now I'm going to trust AI to do that. So I think if you're not using if you're only doing manual testing now, fantastic. But I'd say get on the journey, because it is, I think, like we've all said, it's not about making your job lesser. I think it's about being able to do more without having to do repetitive work. And you can do that with a tool, but you can definitely do that with AI as well.
I think the other thing is that I think everyone joined technology because it's exciting and it changes. If you're hanging on to an old technique or an old technology, you probably have a very slow descent in terms of opportunity. Things change, right? Things are new and new things come out. So yeah, firms are sticking to old techniques because they are not confident out there. There's probably someone out there who's still checking and testing fax machines as well, right? And so that's probably a very small market for that now. So I think if you're interested in very small niche markets, keep going there. But I can't see why anyone in this industry isn't embracing this. And when we talk to large technology companies, throughout the whole stack of their organisation, they're embracing it everywhere.
What I would add to that as well is that we are going through the hype cycle. So there's a lot of people saying it's immediate benefit, go off, do it. We're also seeing a flip side of that, which is the hallucinations, which is where we've invested our time or money in trying to get something and it didn't quite work. So, be conscious of your decisions around what it is that you're looking at. In particular, we've had some experiences where we've been working together with some partners or discussing AI with partners, because every single partner that you will talk to out there at the moment, yes, we've got an AI offering. How long have you had it? Who's using it? Is it productionised? Is it any good? Everyone's trying to jump on the bandwagon, which is great. And we'll see, the market sort of move up and down and all sorts of things. But yeah, make sure that they've got some demonstrated experience in what they're doing.
And I think I would just want to add to that, some teams, maybe they need to do manual testing. But if you think about how much time you have spent to teach the people coming to your team, knowledge sharing, hold their hands, do this, do that, those, the time spent there can also be helped by AI. So there's not just writing test scripts, but the things around it.
Thanks, Rico. I think we've got time for one more question. If there's anyone up the back, I feel like I'm ignoring the back rows. There's a guy right there. I'm going to jog down there.
Huge run.
I'm going to jog it out.
He's going to go. One of the things I think is funny is that AI testing, because it is random and probability based, we generated hallucination, one of the Microsoft tools, and the standard team was, oh, just send me what you did and we'll see if we can reproduce it. It's just, you can't do this anymore. It's very different. You've got to measure it statistically. Question at the back.
Yeah, the theme coming through this is do more, do it quickly. I work with Tabcorp, highly regulated. ANZ,
ANZ.
highly regulated. Do you find that that's a real bottleneck for you, though? That it's all well and good to have these things speeding through, but your regulators hold you up?
So I might jump in there, and then I think James had most of the sort of background on testing, on regulation. Just at a policy level, we're having conversations with regulators because there's a balance between making sure that you protect Australian consumers but also enable Australian futures. And I'm quite passionate about this. For those of you who are as old as me, and I suspect there's many people here who were born well after the internet, but my career started with the beginning of the internet, and the standard language was there, one of anxiety that Australia would be left behind. The standard message today is we're worried that Australia will be exploited by AI, and we need to be mindful of the real risk that comes from AI, but the regulators, in my opinion, need to probably balance that with the scale of the opportunity. We have those conversations with regulators, and so far there's a lot of regulation we've had that already eliminates our use of certain AI use cases. So there's not necessarily a benefit in layering on more things. For example, we can't and would never, not within our risk appetite, but we also would never use faces to identify people by using AI, because we can't use faces today to measure people if they're walking into branches or walking past ATMs, because it's the way the privacy rules around your use of data. But the other part of this, and I think James will be able to better answer this, is the regulators demand proof that we're actually staying within our guardrails. And do you want to talk about how that's something that either you are using or hoping that you could use with this?
Yeah, I think from it was Tabcorp, I think. Like all of those requirements, they effectively just come as a PDF. And for ANZ, we have exactly the same scenario, like multiple different regulators all around the world. Then we have a person who reads that PDF and says, yep, that looks like the sort of change we need to make, and then they ins and outs and ups and downs, and then another person reads it the next day, and it's all about ingesting data at that point anyway. So what the advantage of some of these tools is that you can go, here's a PDF, tell me how we're going to develop that, and it's never going to be 100% right, because it's all perception based anyway, whether it's a person reading it or a tool. The other advantage,
interpretation bias is quite high.
Of course. The other advantage that we have is that a lot of those requirements come in multiple different languages around the world, and sometimes it's amazing if you've got someone who's fluent in that language, who reads those requirements and then goes, all right, this is the change we need to make. But that's not always the case. So it does mean that we've got this advantage of being able to disseminate those requirements and then build some test cases, build the development tools, and then also be able to move a little bit quicker. The other thing that happens, and I'm sure this happens with Tabcorp as well, is requirements will come, or the regulator will come and say, on this date you have to make a change. And we will say, cool, what's the change? And they're like, we'll tell you later. Yeah. So then we just have this hole in our delivery stream which says, we're going to get some requirements at some stage. Yeah. And they will come, they'll go, they'll get manipulated around in the way that even the regulators aren't quite sure at that point. So it really does enable us to move a hell of a lot quicker. And what it does mean is that because we're just reading from a requirements document, it means that the engineers can move a little bit quicker as well.
And there's one last little tidbit about this, is that, do you guys know how many regulatory agencies we have to comply with globally? Have a guess?
A lot.
540. Right, and the problem is they're contradictory, and they produce this level of uncertainty. So back to the gentleman's question at the back of the room, one of the things we're hoping to get out of AI is the ability for us to understand the morass of regulations and where our risks are for our existing policies.
All right, time. Great work, ANZ panel and Tim, amazing. Before you leave the stage, we do have the gift card. So one question from you guys to the audience. First person to raise their hand and get it right, get the gift card. Who wants to do the question? Any question based on your panel discussion?
What's ANZ's colour?
Oh. Do you know who raised their hand first? That's the tricky bit. Eric?
Eric.
What is it, Eric? I heard everyone else say it.
No, we need the actual sign. We need the RGB code.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks again, guys.